Okay, I think we're live. We should be live. I hope everyone can hear me okay. And thank you for joining me. So I guess I'll just get right into it. Things have been really crazy energetically for the past probably a couple months, but really culminating in the last probably week or so. I'm not sure, time's a bit fuzzy. But I've been going through a lot of different sort of experiences and dealing with a lot of demonic and psychic attacks. And so what ended up happening was, I also call these greetings. They're not meant to be. They don't have to be seen in such a negative light. I'm someone who's called to really investigate these occurrences here. And I wouldn't recommend that path for everyone, but it is definitely a way to expand, I guess, ourselves. It is one way to do that. So, anyway, so I sort of have had pretty close encounters with pretty detailed experiences, and they were pretty immense and intense. And so now what I'm doing is, or what I basically did was I kind of got so in such a fear state that I kind of got stuck and called out to the stars, really. And I was sort of reminded of what I'm here to do and stuff like that, finally. And it was really interesting how it happened. And the council basically just connected with me, and they offered me this message. And then they offered me a whole series of like downloads, just one after the other, about what's going on right now with the collective awakening, what's going on with sort of star-seeded souls or souls identified or people that identify that way, wanderers, and essentially they offered this message, and sort of I said, who's this for? Because I was curious what if it's just meant for me, or if I'm meant to distribute it. They basically said it's for all those groups, lightworkers, etc., but primarily it's for anyone who feels called in this life to open their heart, that feels called to find what I call the way, which is just peace, right? So anyone who feels called for that, that's sort of what this, if that's what you feel like you might be here to do, then this is for you. So basically we're going to do a whole bunch of stuff that came through, and then if there's questions, then maybe we'll do a Q&A. It depends. It's going to be a lot of information probably. And so none of this is meant to disturb anyone or anything like that. If there are aspects of anything that comes through that feels disturbing, just discard it. You don't need to investigate into areas that don't feel resonant for you. If something I say doesn't feel true, just let it go, discard it. These are just things that I've experienced in my seeking, as well as what I remember and what's been offered to me by the council. So one of the most important things is to remember the council's not an authority of any kind. They're basically here trying to help, the same way the other social memory complexes are here, are people call the Galactic Federation of Light, or the Galactic Confederation of Planets in service to the one infinite creator. I think these are somewhat distortions of the same thing or similar efforts. So I don't think the nomenclature is super important, other than remembering that the beings are all here to serve, offering service to us, not to like try to make us do stuff. They're also, by saving us, they're sort of making us be saved, right? So it's the same infringement. They don't fix anything for us directly that way. They offer philosophy basically, until eventually we will get more direct contact. We will probably look to join them. It would make sense for our evolution to do that. So eventually it'll get much more interactive and close, I guess, as far as the direct connections. Right now there's primarily speaking through channels that are randomized, sort of random people basically that got called to be these types of conduits for these messages, because in the past there was primarily trying to work through the governments, because it was sort of thought, well, the governments are basically the ones who are deciding kind of how things are going. it would make sense to offer the leaders the information. And it's kind of, I guess, one of the naive kind of mistakes that are made, thinking that sort of the leaders will do what's best and then offering it just to the leaders. That wasn't really working. And then also the other messengers that, like myself, were asleep, right? So we weren't able to really get the messaging sometimes, or if we did, we just ignored it, stuff like that. So now that the collective vibration has risen to the degree that it has, you've probably felt that there's new frequencies here, and may actually have felt really uncomfortable for a time. What this is what they showed me was that this is the solar flares, or the coronal mass ejections are, in many ways, and you've probably heard this, but people will call them upgrades and stuff. It's kind of like that. The way that they showed it to me was sort of our consciousness, or the Akash of the earth, is a sphere, an ever expanding sphere. And what happens is sort of in divine cycles, divine cycling, that can be sort of expressed in the physical. So it manifests into the physical with these coronal mass ejections, which cause like geomagnetic storms and the Schumann resonance to go all bananas. That this is essentially new frequencies that the collective is calling for, like bringing the light in, basically. And that's the physical manifestation of that. So it's essentially due to our seeking for the light and calling for it that we start to call in more of it, right? And then you're going to notice that because the vibration suddenly changes and things adjust, people get anxious, more or less. People get anxious because it's unsettling both the astral areas, so the entities that are trying to feed in lower vibrational states. It's unsettling those entities, both in the physical ways, in humans, like when we're sort of in a bit of a slumber state, we're going to start having a lot of anxieties coming in, and we're going to start to follow like really compulsive type fear-based things. Part of that is to basically the frequency is at a degree where that stuff, it has to be let go of. So the person will experience this and they'll eventually go, I have to let go of this. This isn't working. And it's not meant as a punishment, but there's no other way to get them to see it and then to let go of it. So it's just sort of the natural way that we experience it. So many of us have probably went through almost mini dark nights of the souls that were even more intense almost than our past ones, but maybe not quite as long. Now everyone's experience is really different, but that was sort of where I called from to get this message. And so I got this channeled message, and then I just had a whole bunch of downloads, like, and I've been stewing with it all day, trying to get it ready, because it's sort of a lot of information, but I'll do my best, and I'm just a messenger. So take what resonates, discard what doesn't. And if you have any questions, throw them in the comments, or in the chat. If you're seeing this video later, just put comments and stuff like that, and I'm willing to try and clarify if I can. So first of all, I guess I should say Gloria in Excelsis Deo. That means all glory in the highest to God. So I say that just because I like to remember that I'm just a conduit for what's coming through, and I feel that that type of energy keeps me humble in my not knowing what the divine's plan is. So I don't plan these videos that much. Like I have a whiteboard that I put some topics on, and then I primarily am channeling, so or connecting into what I feel is source, and then channeling that through. Hi Debbie, hi. So grateful for you joining. Thank you. So I kind of am mostly channeling through these types of things that I'm going to probably do more of. The way that they made it feel was that this was something that I'm being offered to continue to do if I find it, I guess, vibrationally in alignment with what I want to do here. So I'm sort of being offered an opportunity to be more of a direct emissary or messenger. And I'm very grateful. So anyways, I'll get right into the channeling. It's just a brief channeling of sort of who they are. This is the council. They are referenced in the Law of One as essentially beings that serve us, that are helping to facilitate our awakening while protecting free will. That's kind of the best thing. The only thing they kind of protect against is trying to minimize how much free will is sort of tried to be taken from us from any external parties, as well as offering philosophy of unity. That's primarily what they're trying to do, but in stages of our readiness, right? So, and so again, this is just for you to discern from your heart, and if it feels good, hang on to it, and if not, just throw it away. We are here with you, as this instrument has called to the stars for guidance to be offered for his brothers and sisters in service to the one infinite creator. Our words will resonate for those they are intended to resonate with, and your being will stir. We see you as you are, divine, the brightest of bright, and we offer our thoughts freely to be shared freely. We are ones who watch, who offer aid through guiding the social memory complexes which are with your peoples at this time. We discern the law of the infinite creator, and we offer our services to these emissaries of light. We are not judge nor jury. We are not authority. You, dear ones, are the authors. Your authorship is your purpose, and we would not infringe upon your will in any way. We are here because we have been called, and we serve you in the purest form we may find. We watch and we aid in specific calls that do not infringe upon free will. Most of the callings at this time are found to be infringing, and thus we must be silent. We are humble servants of the one infinite creator, and we would not stir you from your path of learning. The Christ is within, and your divinity rises from slumber as individual and collective. As bread being baked, you will remember and rise. There is one way, and thus only one destination. Each will progress upon it in their perfect expression. The destination is grace through peace. We ask humbly to be open to your heart. Let in that which expands, and be joyous in the mystery of your divinity emerging. You will not know until you recall you know nothing, and begin to truly learn. When something is known, an entity ceases seeking. Know nothing, and in your humility you will see yourself and remember. Go then, be at peace, and march ever forward, basking in the light and love of the one infinite creator. Cool. So that was one of the first messages from the council that I've had, which is kind of interesting. And it has its own interest, because I was in a bad place yesterday and the day before, pretty much. And just in my sort of awareness, I was getting constantly psychic attacked, essentially. And this happens. People are pretty aware of this, probably, if they've gone through awakening in various religious teachings, or in Buddhism, or in Christianity as well. We talk of demons and things, and that's essentially what this is. We each sort of will experience that in our own way, and then we have the different ways that comes about, and how intense it is, depending on what we are particularly here to do. So I'm particularly here to talk about some of that, and look at the shadow and help switch the polarity of that is one of my roles. And it's not always a happy task, I guess. But anyways, so I got into a pretty dark place, and I started to actually question, I'd had these really galactic feelings for a long time, but I started to just question all of that and just be like, I've just been deluded or something. I've just, and I started to get really down, I guess. And so I was able to somehow, I guess, have this call go out, and they just came in really clearly with that message, and then the download started. So it really helped me remember that we're not alone as well. So a lot of us, we may feel that this place is not home quite, right? Part of that, there's two aspects of that. One is that the soul memory has a different idea of what home means, and we've forgotten ourselves a bit. And so because of that, we will constantly feel not at home until we're at home in ourselves, first of all. But then we also have other lifetimes memories, and there are a lot of entities here that are from other places that have weird memories. They remember different planets or weird different civilizations, things like that. And, you know, and I have those experiences as well. And I've talked to many people about it. So basically, they are here to offer these different social memory complexes have these sort of spheres of intelligence, or Akash, you could say, similar to the Earth. And that is all getting integrated into ours as it all expands. So we all have different tunings, I guess, with different social memory complexes, and we're pulling in various 4th, 5th, and 6th density teachings. And then some of us actually teach them in a traditional sense where we're trying to teach. Others of us are just being it, right? Being it. So, and the teachers that, like myself, we try to be it. I try to be it as well, of course. And I think that what we're being called to recognize is that those of us who are called into this stuff is we're actually being asked, just invited, really, I guess is the nice way to say it, is we're being invited to be our authentic self, which is the self that knows the way, and the way is peace. We're just being invited to notice our compulsions, I think, is sort of how they framed it, because what we're trying to do is activate the 4th density body in more full. We're trying to activate, essentially what we're doing is heart mind coherence. There are lots of good resources on those materials. If you search heart mind coherence, I think Dr. Joe Dispenza does a bunch of stuff about that. And then there's also lots of different heart mind coherence meditations. So I'm going to leave the pathway to you to try and feel that. But that heart mind coherence state could also be called the I am state. It's the presence of allness, of wholeness. And what we're being asked to do is to try to maintain that presence while engaging with stimuli. And once we do that, that's what they've called entering the kingdom. That's when the kingdom of heaven becomes where we are. It is sort of the birth of the permanent new earth within us. So you've heard, I'm sure, people say that new earth is here now. And it's not like a weird time thing. What it means is that it is our perception that discerns for us the place we're in. And when we have perceptions of judgment about the reality around us or within us, then we experience judgment, right? We experience some type of fear, which contributes to us feeling threatened and then acting in disharmony with basically the laws of the universe, which is what creates karma. And then we have this cycling until we learn essentially to forgive whatever we feel the cause to be of the reality that we're experiencing. So an easy example for forgiveness is like when it rains, let's say we have a thing we want to go do outside and it rains and we're like, oh, I can't do that thing anymore. We pretty easily, usually, not all of us, but most of us, I would say, pretty easily forgive nature, right? There's what can be done. It's rain, you know? What can be done? It is what it is. Some of us, that will really, really send us into a negative spiral. But primarily we can just go, oh, okay, that's how it is. And that's essentially what we're getting invited to do. And when we can do that, we can actually hold that I am frequency while wandering around and engaging with people. And this is where we start to really actually, we will build a energetic auric sort of field that the longer we hold this state, it just becomes somewhat magnetic and somewhat also we will inspire inner seeking within people around us, essentially. Things that they were not thinking about because they were trying to avoid will actually be risen up just from being in our auric presence when we're able to hold this state around other people. This is essentially why people who would go to see gurus and things would just go, oh, their aura, I healed. That's what they mean, basically. And so after all of this light comes in, basically we are all then invited to basically step up our octave or step up into the new vibration or the new sort of default. And so this process gets sort of, it should get smoother and smoother. Basically, as each time this happens and we expand and we expand and we expand, we eventually hit these thresholds where we think we know, basically. And so they referenced in there that remember that you know nothing. Remember that the only reason that you exist is to expand and to know yourself. So you can't know what you don't know, and you'll never know all of it, sort of. That's where the humility comes in, to just understand I don't know. And in that humbleness of that, like, that's an innocent sort of, that the Fool card comes to mind. Just, I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to walk forward as if it's perfect. And you'll find that if you can hold that, then you're going to attract all these magical things, basically, if you're open to that experience. And that's sort of the frequency we're being invited to live in and hold. And we're getting to a place where, I'm not sure how to say this, but there's sort of nexus time crossovers, you could call them, where we make decisions, I guess, collective sort of decisions about what timeline we're bringing the Earth on. You might call it a timeline. And the decisions are mostly illusory. The decisions themselves happen simply from the collective sort of seeking and calling for it. So there's not like right now, because the planetary consciousness is slumbering still, kind of jostling itself awake. So there's a bit of jostling that just happens with some instability. So this wave of up and down will start to sort of diminish over time as we come out of the age of light, where we're just waking up, like, oh, we're waking from the dream. We've been asleep for quite a while, most of us, right? And the collective certainly has. So we're awaking from that dream, and we're not able to fully orient ourselves. Like we don't remember the divine laws, basically, and we don't remember what we are, and then we start to figure that out. And in that process, we have to remember a lot of or forget a lot of what we're not, right? We have to let go of a lot, which is what they end up calling the dark night of the soul. And activating the fourth density body, there's a lot of different ways to do that. All of the ways are essentially forgiveness, which might sound weird, but what we want to do, there's so many different ways to do it, but the primary focus probably should be on the heart, opening the heart. So things we reject, or things that we think about ourselves that are really negative, we're gonna have to dismantle those. There are many approaches to this. My approach is what would be called the more divine masculine approach to balancing, or wisdom. And my approach can feel very cold. It can feel a little unloving. But on that, either approach, love or wisdom, is loving to the same degree. They're just different polarities of truth, basically, is sort of the way you can look at that. So there's processes that we can go through in meditation to try and build this energy. We could call it our chi, prana, and our focus, and learning how to maintain that energy, and then infusing the heart center with light. That's one way to do that. And what happens when we start to do that is we actually will purify, not purify to liquidate or like dissolve, but we'll actually stir up and make this any sort of distortions that we were holding in the lower chakras, we'll stir them up to be processed again so that they can be released. So we'll experience any number of catalysts around us to remind us of these painful things that we keep holding on to. These are things that make us feel like we know who we are in the old way, in the old earth, or in the old system. So as we come out of that, we need to start to let go of those things. And so as we put that light into our heart, this will occur. Now, there are many of us that we're not even aware that our soul, divinity, is already doing that for us in many ways, that we're just not called necessarily to be involved in that learning right now, that we remember it and it's happening automatically, that there's nothing for us to learn. We already innately manage that fairly well and have the open heart already. And that has its own sort of drawbacks as well. So there's always challenge that's involved. And it really depends on what karmic stuff that we've accumulated and how much we've participated in like our forgetful, unloving behaviors and thoughts. And so we're essentially looking to purify all of that, which is entering the kingdom. This is the heaven that we would think of. It's about knowing the Christ itself, or the divine expressive self within, that is seeking to be a divine observer, and then letting that self, just like basically the ego steps aside entirely and lets the Christed divine self speak. Once the identity is enough, like acquiescing to the divinity within, then it steps aside. And that's what I do to channel, for example. It's what I do primarily when I'm doing these videos. You could say Sean is like sort of adding some context and stuff from the human experience, but primarily divinity is helping me form what I'm trying to offer, because the souls on the other end are calling for whatever I'm offering in some way, even if it's just to be like, nah. So it's all good. So it's interesting how it all works, but we're all going to be doing that. And the challenges that arise are, as I was saying, like discomfort, old stories coming back to us. And what we're trying to learn how to do is to be our authentic, peaceful self in the face of these challenging remembrances. So we'll find ourselves projecting onto other people past pains, right? For example, like someone will say something to us. I think my mom said something about me making a mess of the oven, and I was like, everyone criticizes me, right? And or just something like that. And like we project these stories onto everyone or whatever it is, and after doing that, we eventually need to realize that we're kind of being a bit silly, you know. And we can have really bad ones, and they can be little tiny things, but the worse we feel about it, sort of the bigger the opportunity it is for us to let go of that thing, that story, the belief that we care. Literally, the belief that we need to defend our being is an illusion. We are divine beings. We don't need to defend our divinity. The part of us that feels called to defend us is the part that feels threatened by something. And it feels threatened because there's fear there. And it's okay to honor that and be where you're at. It's totally perfect. It's about noticing where we're at. A big thing that they wanted to highlight was, right now, we're going to find our compulsions, both relationally and in the physical, are going to highlight for us our experience. That when we feel a compulsion of some kind, like, oh, I always do this thing, I'm just going to do it, or I'm going to behave this way for this person because that's what they expect of me. These type of compulsive just reactions to the reality, we're going to be asked to let go of some of these, because it's sort of programming is what it is, and it can be sort of a positive kind of thing or a negative kind of thing. It can be quite neutral. We're meant to sort of ask ourselves and discern for us what is serving us, right? So as we do a compulsive thing, like, if my partner says something to me that upsets me, the compulsion arises to like retaliate maybe, or to, I have to just let them know that I'm angry a little bit, or that I'm hurt. There's this compulsion that arises, and I don't think that I need to do that, right? I think that that's probably not necessary. I don't really need to get into it. I can let it go. Now, letting it go is not always super, super easy. But that's sort of the opportunity, is just to be like, well, either I'm okay as I am, and it's okay, or it's not. I mean, what else is there to really do? It becomes a sort of realization that, we're just doing what we're trying to do, right? And we're trying to generally expand our heart and to find peace. And so because we're doing that, we get all these opportunities that test peace, because it's sort of like, you could think of it very, very much like we are students of ourselves, always students of ourselves, because the higher self is what sort of discerns our curriculum for us. We are students of ourselves, and we are given lessons and then tests of those lessons. So we'll tend to find that we either have an insight or something, a realization, and then the realization will get tested. We'll realize something about ourselves, and then it will get tested in our reality in some way. And this is part of our doubt starting to express itself, basically. So we may have a realization about ourselves and then experience some doubt. And so it's sort of the natural polarity of consciousness as it evolves is to kind of be skeptical of the world, right? Try to be skeptical of things, because there's fear, essentially. And then as that fear dissolves, we get more open and we'll get much more comfortable. And that's what that Christed presence sort of means. We call it Christ here, or the Christ consciousness, you could call it. And that's sort of the divine expression in purity, when you would be sort of in a channeled state all the time. And it's very achievable. I promise you, it's very achievable. It's right now we're at a stage where most of us are being really restless and impatient, because we can feel it. We can feel that we're on the precipice of major transformation, and we've probably been feeling like this for a while, and it's sort of ramped up. And that there's a lot of feeling like kind of waiting, and we're not really sure what we're waiting for. And we're kind of waiting for each other, in a way, is the way I've experienced it. We're kind of waiting for all of us to get to similar sort of frequencies in our different areas of the world and everything, in order to bring the consciousness up in a gentle kind of way. Seems to be the orientation, as gently as we can. But there's when we hit these sort of plateaus, we get pops like the one we've been experiencing, or just finishing, I think, probably. So it's an invitation now to be authentically who you are, and essentially inviting you to respond to any struggles that you have peacefully. So, and to do so especially while observing compulsion. So for example, if you see a Facebook post and you it stirs you in a bad way, or you feel compulsion to defend something like that, is something that you can get a lot of learning out of, for example. And we have enough bandwidth right now to really investigate that fairly quickly, probably, and let go of something that really doesn't serve us. It doesn't serve us to waste our energy on these things. The truth doesn't need defense. That's the best way that I can think of it. Is truth doesn't need defense. It's just true. It's self-evident of itself. Just by being, it is true. So you can use truth, but you don't need to market truth or to do anything. Being truth is the way, sort of, and truth is will land in peace eventually. So peace is the way, is sort of how I see it, but which I've probably said a few times. And that's what we're kind of being invited to do, is to be the way. We don't have to tell people, oh, I'm from the stars. We don't have to do any of that. We can, of course, do whatever you want. I've told people that I feel like I'm from the stars. I mean, it makes sense to me. That's how it feels. So I don't go around calling myself anything other than a wizard. Wizard just means wise one. And wise one means one who knows they do not know. So that's why I call myself a wizard, because I don't know. It's sort of a little joke at myself, actually, that I call myself a wizard. It's also a little bit of fantasy and fun, a sort of like exciting term for me, magic, mysterious. So I'm not sure why I'm talking about that, but those identities about that, we don't have to talk about any of that stuff. We don't have to do that if we don't want to. You may feel like a wizard yourself, and I would say you probably are one. So when you start to realize like you have a truer expression of what you feel, and you may feel called to express that in some way, artistically or creatively in some fashion, or to teach like I'm doing or whatever, all of them will have their different barriers or resistances that might come up. Like if it was guitar and music or something, maybe you're like, I'm not good enough, but there's no reason you like couldn't do it, right? Like you could do it. There's a whole bunch of different stuff like that that'll come up, and essentially the opportunity is to be divinity expressing, and then when conflict shows up, because conflict stuff's going to happen in your life, right? Things are going to happen. A lot of people are still sort of kind of sleepwalking a bit, and we have to love them too, and love their path, and basically fully honor wherever they are at, to the degree that we don't find our responsibility in teaching them anything, right? Like this was something I got really stuck on, is, if somebody wants, I try to teach people, and I do one-on-ones, and I do a lot of direct work with people. A lot of people want to be taught, but don't get what I'm teaching. And then, and that's okay. That's totally fine. But what ends up happening is, part of the issue is I feel bad about that. And I start to, because I feel responsible to make sure a certain threshold of information or understanding, comprehension has been given, so that I can feel like I did my job properly. I think that makes sense, and it's not coming from a place of like, oh my God, it's how I feel like I should serve them, is by getting them to understand. But I can't get them to understand anything. We can't get anyone to understand anything. All we can do is offer what we offer, and then what they do with it is entirely at their discretion. There's nothing else for us to do. So we have to actually let go of the attachment of all that, and then we can just freely give whatever, and we'll just feel good giving it. It won't matter. Was that an orb that just floated? No, probably not. On the left side of the screen, it's probably my incense. I'm burning some myrrh. I was thinking of my buddy Jesus, Yeshua, Jehoshua, and I wanted to burn some of that for this stream. So it probably wasn't an orb, but it could have been. I don't know. It's totally possible. So the other thing that they wanted to say was that you're not alone. We have the way they described it was sort of like we have a council sort of three entities, most of us, the divine feminine, divine masculine, and then androgynous entity. And these entities take whole varying shapes and forms how divinity expresses itself to us. So it doesn't mean we only have like one guide. We could have many, but they use these 3 points that are sort of our collective council, is the way that they sort of described it for each entity that's here. So I'm not sure why I'm talking about. Oh, because you're not alone. Yeah, that's why. So you're not alone, and those entities are there to guide you, and so you can talk to them and ask for things and ask for information. Essentially, anything that doesn't infringe on your own seeking, like they're not going to tell you something you're not really ready to hear, even if you think you're ready. So a lot of times, and I've went through this a lot, like I think I'm ready for a bit of information, or I think I'm ready for a certain degree of knowingness of myself, and it turns out I'm just not, I'm just not ready for that yet. So you're sort of wanting to go in just understanding that the learning, everything's divinely perfect in timing. The learning that we're doing, the knowing that we're doing, is on a cycle that we have determined to be the appropriate cycle. Like what we need to learn approaches us in its divine timing, and it's that we have to try to settle that impatient part of us that's like, I want to know all of it now, because we've kind of grown up in a society that's acts a bit like that, right? They want everything now, right away. and it doesn't, that's part of actually why time exists, is patience and also cause and effect. Without time, there's no way to discern cause and effect at all. So there's no real experience to really navigate in this dimension, if that makes sense. So we're invited to be that authentic self, to be that expression of divinity peacefully. And so it doesn't mean that we don't offer the truth. So if we feel like offering truth, that's fine. But a lot of times we're offering like weird, kind of scary things because we want to tell people the truth of what's happening. And we're kind of being invited to question, like, am I showing that peace and love is here? Or am I showing that there's stuff here to be afraid of? Because certainly there's stuff to be afraid of, certainly. Now that stuff isn't totally real in the truest sense of reality, but there's a lot to look at. There's a lot of illusion to look at that could inspire fear, certainly. And the suggestion from the council was that we don't, why? We know, like, those of us who know are aware of what's going on here. It's now where it's just a matter of letting it, letting the universe heal it, really. Doing what we feel called to do to help where we feel called to help. But honestly, just sort of trying to frame it as, I see my way of serving here is to do this. If what we're trying to do is just help, and we're not concerned about what happens from the offering of our help, we're going to find that's probably our highest pathway of service. So for me, it's just to give an example, I try to speak my true experience. I try to be very skeptical of my own experience, just enough to be really authentic about my own, like, I don't know, So I try to do that, and to speak to people who are seeking what I have also been seeking. And by doing that, I just feel like if I'm not teaching what I'm discovering, and pulling in or hearing, and that it the stuff I'm pulling in and hearing, even if it's not real, it makes sense. It just makes sense. So I don't, what am I supposed to do with it, right? It just makes sense. so I share it. And I'm kind of in this state of like being aware that I have no idea what any of this is, but it is very magical, and I'm curious to see where it goes. And if I'm being somehow tricked, it feels really good. It's lots of fun, and it seems like a really profound and important message. And so I'm just really grateful to participate in that. But that's how I do it. I don't so much care what happens after, like, I say what I say and share what I've experienced and what's come through, and then what happens from there is, it's up to God, really. And even this, what comes through is sort of, I see that as just being up to God in many ways. And that's what I mean by that Gloria in Excelsis Deo. I like to remind myself that we're all just sort of conduits of that same thing. We just have different expressions of it. And so there's no hierarchy to the expression. And so we don't have to, a lot of us, I think they might see someone, this is sort of what happened to me. And actually probably one of the reasons I'm teaching is like, oh, I know some of the stuff the teachers are teaching. I should probably teach then. Like, I just kind of presumed that. And then I had to kind of really evaluate, is that truly what I want? It turned out I was right. But initially it was kind of tainted a bit by these presumptions. And so we want to just be, a lot of us too, we want to teach, and even myself included, I've wanted to teach when I wasn't quite ready in various ways. There's different things that I wasn't ready to do, I guess, yet, for some reason. And I'm still figuring all that out. But they also wanted to talk about near-death experiences and Kundalini awakenings. And that people, if they haven't had a Kundalini awakening, they may feel that come on. There may be more spontaneous pops, spontaneous Kundalini awakenings. So you may find people that that just recently experienced them. You may experience one yourself. If you haven't really experienced the Kundalini yet, it can be quite shocking. It should feel quite good, usually. It should feel quite good. But it can be also a little freaky. Because what ends up happening, depending on the intensity of it, the chakras, the Kundalini rises from the first up into the 8th or the 7th chakra, in the crown chakra. And what essentially is happening when we're shut off, when we're like asleep, you could say, that's, I guess, kind of the way to put it. It's a process, so it's not all quite as boxed as this sounds. But the energy sort of getting blocked down here, and it's not really getting into the heart enough. The experience isn't really being filtered through the heart too much. What eventually happens is the heart opens, and divinity from the crown meets with the Kundalini rising, and it'll meet into the down here, and then it meets up. It suddenly raises into the heart, up into the throat, into the pineal gland, and then it explodes out of the crown. So people that have that happen are going to feel, they might feel their body kind of shivering a lot. They might not be able to stand. They might have to just lay down. I had to lay down. And it went on for me for about 20 minutes, I think. And then after that, I was in a state of bliss for about 7 days. But all of that was a very wacky and actually challenging experience after, because right after that, it goes away, and then there's lots of guilt in a spontaneous awakening. And these are going to happen more and more. And the way that they relate to near-death experiences is that part of the reason for near-death experiences is to inform the being that they are infinite beings, that they're not just the body. they have some sort of purpose usually here. Sometimes it's just to actually speak about the NDE. But what ends up happening is the NDE doesn't always, but can be used as a trigger for the activation of the fourth energy center, or the dual ray activated body. This will happen. You can imagine, I guess, if you have an electrical system and you want to suddenly turn on a big thing of it, the body may die. You turn off the system, make the change, turn it back on. That does happen. And it's the same thing that happens when you have an awakening, which is often essentially an NDE. So when an individual starts to think about taking their own life enough, they have they draw to them the manifestation of their imminent sort of demise. And this can cause, in one who's ready to awaken, it will cause a pop. They will usually, in that moment, they usually have to turn it back. They have to turn back to divinity and ask. And so you'll find atheists and things, and people that will say that they decided to say something like, if there's a God, I need help right now, something like that. And that's often what precipitates this pop. So they're NDEs that trigger that are actual sort of physical experiences, but then there's one that's just a manifestation in the consciousness of imminent death, which essentially they give up on the identity. They just give up on it. And so it just is surrendered, because it's like, whatever. It's just given up. And once that happens, the being will essentially realize it's eternal through the Kundalini awakening. They might feel a lot of expansion in the head, like pulsing maybe, and then shivers up and down the spine, goosebumps, stuff like that. And after that happens, then we go through, usually we end up going through periods of really challenging places where we're questioning every single thing about the life. And so many of us have had sort of short bursts of this spine energy that I'm talking about, and the shivers and stuff. And that's the Kundalini kind of stirring, right? It's kind of like a rattlesnake, like, and that's when the spirit is like, something is really catching its vibe, is a good way to think about that. So if you get those tingles and it feels pleasant, it all feels pleasant, it's usually the spirit kind of signaling, hey, there's something here. And it may be something just to learn here, but it also may be something that's calling you. So you have to use your discernment, and then, act in whatever way you feel is appropriate, and learn from whatever sort of errors in perception you might have had, and then go from there. But that's one of the ways that you start to tune in. After the Kundalini awakens, this becomes more and more stronger, till you will have states where you're sitting and then the body just buzzes with an ecstasy. And that's a great state. And that's essentially where you're going to end up walking around like. So yeah. All right, so let me see. I'm going to take a look at the comments here. Okay. Thank you everyone for listening and hanging out. Appreciate it. Hope you guys are having a good time. Okay, so E said, been getting a remembrance of being the observer. Maybe this is related to what you're saying. Yeah. We are much like that. We are a witness to the moment. I call it the sacred witness. I'm not sure where that term's from. But yeah, you can imagine each moment is a sort of frame in reality. The only reason we put any meaning to a moment is because we've taken a moment and taken that frame and expanded it into potentials or past stuff with our ego. Like, oh, this happened all up here to then create this moment And if we, when we're in our Christed presence, we're just present with this moment is as it is. It doesn't have any cause and effect. And this is how we can discern between being the observer or being in the non-linear mind, basically, essentially just watching what the body does, sort of what the form does. That's that expression that we're the observer. We're just watching what the form does. And then we're observing these other moments that led to what this form did. The story isn't quite there anymore. And that's essentially what it means to me as far as that. Thank you for bringing that up. Up and down, like an overcorrection. Yeah, exactly. Up and down overcorrection. Yeah, that's essentially what our karma really is an overcorrection. And we have we have a collective karma here. We have a individual sort of as an entity karma. But because we're all one being, we have very close-knit agreements with each other to work through varying things, essentially. So we're often invited to overcorrect. So, for example, if my friend stole something from me when we were younger, I might be really upset and hold that against him, and then, you know, maybe later in life he asks to borrow something from me, and, you know, he's been a good friend, he hasn't done anything since. I'm offered an opportunity to recover or to forgive and to just let him borrow the thing. Or I let him borrow the thing and have all these angry thoughts about it, like, why did I do that? And, you know, whatever, or I don't let him. But we're offered these opportunities to readdress the karma. Like, and so we can hold on to these little things like that with people so long. And that's why a lot of us isolate during this experience of remembering ourselves, because the more attachments we have with other people, the more sensitive we are to like what is happening in that relationship. And we start to feel more and more like weird, usually, because we're not seeming to necessarily vibe with everyone again anymore. And part of that is because of what they're talking about, the level of consciousness that a lot of people are talking in and about just is like, doesn't stir us. So we're kind of like, I mean, okay. And we may like people and engage with them as much as we can, but a part of us might be feeling this way. So that it all depends, of course. But we do that, and then we form these ups and downs. And a lot of us, we don't really realize that we've been being really, really social for most of our lives, when we actually kind of prefer not to be as social. We just thought that social was the way to go. We're social beings, so we're going to want to be social to a degree, probably, but generally. But some of the ways we've been extra social, we may just be like, let's rein it in. Like, look how many attachments and so much energy that I'm giving to all of these relationships. And we'll just be called to pull it in, because we'll need to use that for ourselves for now, for healing. And then maybe later we'll blossom again out and do more and find more harmony in that. So we have to kind of trust how we feel. And you'll be thinking about these sort of things. Like, I keep going out with this group of friends, and it's like kind of or whatever. And you know, it's just an opportunity to let some of these things that don't seem to be following your joy, just let them fall away. It doesn't mean that you turn away from anything that is joyless. Sometimes a joyless experience is meant for you to realize something, right? So if you're having a really bad experience lately with your partner, it doesn't just mean you abandon the whole thing. Now you have to, of course, follow your guidance, but you can observe that, you know, there's an opportunity to try to find harmony, probably, and then make decisions after that. So like you don't have to you're learning, I think, to ride the waves. There's going to be waves of sort of chaos in the reality around us that other people are experiencing, and then because they're a little unconscious, a lot of people they'll put it on you, maybe a little bit or a lot, and or you'll put it on yourself, and that's what we're trying to stop doing. We're trying to be more sturdy on the ocean, I guess. So we're rising to the top of the sea, I guess you could say, instead of letting the waves crash us all around. We're just like riding with them, sort of. And there's some finesse and learning that happens there. Yeah, no, I'm burning incense. I'm burning incense. It's myrrh incense. It's done now. It's done now. I call it the knowing. Yeah, the knowing. That's a cool word. What's the point of being with a twin flame? Well, I would say that the point of being with a twin flame is union with yourself. The purpose of the external world in general is union with yourself. The purpose of everything you experience is to know yourself. So if you're involved in a twin flame concept and feel drawn into this, to explore this, just feels right for you, then you go into it and you learn of yourself through it, basically. So the purpose of it is to, I like to say, you're guiding each other home. My partner Tassel says that a lot, that we're guiding each other home, and home is just to ourselves. So we're just kind of doing everything that I talked about actually today. We're just kind of doing that together, in a partnership, in a what we call a divine partnership. So it's a great opportunity to be able to do what is traditionally a quite lonesome experience, to do that with another. And that's all I would say it is. It's just two people that are committing to doing that. What's going on at the soul level beyond that, who could know? I wouldn't pretend to know. I wonder, and I have some ideas, but nothing that I could illustrate with any type of real clarity. But we're essentially learning that we are one being. We're learning that with each other, basically. Yeah. What you said about I don't know what's going on, but walk forward, calm in the storm, no control. Oh, that's a great thing to bring up. Yeah. Control is a fun one. I have to have a sip of my coffee because I am parched. Thank you. Oh, it's in my mustache. So the no control, it seems, over the process. Yeah. We don't have any control. We like to think we do. And what we'll find is we'll begin to just realize that we don't actually have control over really anything. We don't have control really over anything. And we eventually also realize we actually don't want control. It's the part of us that is afraid, that thinks it needs control. That part of us doesn't have to function that way. It will until we see it, and that's why we see it. We're like, oh, I'm actually pretty controlling. I thought I was pretty easygoing, but I'm actually, like, even just for myself, I can be pretty controlling if I'm inspired to be. If I feel that I know the way, I will just go, right? And I'm, I don't really listen to anything. I just do whatever I got to do. And so in a way, my will can be just difficult for other people in some circumstances, because I will not listen to anyone. And that has served me well for my learning. But basically, we have to look at these different ways that we are stuck to, like, essentially discerning that the human self, the lower identity or the lower self, doesn't actually know what's happening, doesn't know what's next, really. It might have some intuitive concepts that have arisen of what might be coming, but it doesn't actually know anything. And what it does know is that it's just trying to find peace. And it just wants peace, basically. But it thinks, because of older programming, that peace is found through safety, which is found through defense and protecting itself from anything it perceives as somehow a threat to its existence. And so it will, this part of us, most of us would just call this the ego. This part of us will basically say, you know, anything to inspire doubt in ourselves, to keep us feeling limited, because it doesn't understand or comprehend infinite love, basically. So it can't grasp that there's nothing to be afraid of. Eventually what happens is it's sort of let go of that. It's realized that it just can't be reality. It just can't be the way it is. Every time that and this is a hard realization. Hopefully it doesn't hurt, but it's not intended to hurt. But every time we question reality and freak out about what just happened, in a way, we are kind of freaking out at God, right? Now, God doesn't judge us for that. There's no divine judgment happening where, what happens is karmically, we judge ourselves immediately about it. That's why it's feeling really bad, is because we've perceived it to be not right, which has caused us to be judging divinity itself. Whatever we're looking at is us, which means it is divine. Everything is of the holiness of all holies. So because we're so immersed in holiness, we are in a way blind to it. And we eventually are, what we're trying to do with this process is awaken to that. And to awaken to that fully, we have to let go of believing that we know what is best, because we simply don't. simply we can know what is best for us in the moment, sort of, but even that is questionable. So we can basically try to be a lot more gentle on ourselves, because a lot of the control stuff too, we don't actually probably like it so much. We don't actually really like being that way. Kind of feels weird to us, but we do it because sometimes we do it because we're meant to do that in that role. Like, for example, if I were a team leader at a job and I had to, like, instruct my employees around, I would have to pretend that I had an interest in directing other people around, right? I'd have to play that role if that was my job. And so a lot of us are balancing this tightrope of, like, playing in these systems or being in these systems while trying to maintain a deeper knowing. And it's an really interesting development. In school, teachers would insist we read their minds to find the right answer. There's not a method to that madness. Yeah, school, essentially, I would say, and I don't think this is a secret, but school was created to create disciplined workers. Education is a great thing. Education's great, but what is mostly taught in school is listen to authority and discipline. It's certainly, there's certainly value in that, but I think what we'll end up doing is doing a much more the student will discern their curriculum themselves, in a way. like what they feel like they want to learn. We'll start to see, I think, more of that eventually. But yeah, the school system was primarily made to kind of enslave minds, into a sort of docile, acquiesced state, so that they can just be kind of told to just do whatever they need to do to increase whatever. But you have to also remember that at a higher level, all of that was kind of, we knew what we were getting into, right? We lots of us were a little naive, I think. We're kind of like, whoa, it's pretty crazy. I think a lot of us feel that way, that we kind of remember that we signed up for something wacky, and then we're just like, but this is a bit more than maybe I thought it would be, or something. I don't know, but we might have that sensation. There's where most of my fear lies, not knowing, which is a form of not being under control. General fear of being in total darkness because we don't know. Yeah, that not knowing, I like to kind of call that the abyss. This is where I would say we get invited to stare into the abyss and know we're safe. And this is a way of, it's a veiled kind of way of saying we have to stare into the darkness of ourselves, the void, people might call it, infinity, and recognize that we are all that is, that we're responsible for everything that we're seeing, every single thing. And that confrontation is really challenging, usually, unless the person's really prepared, really prepared. So there's lots of fear about all that. Lots of fear about like trying to discern, well, what do I get to control, and what can I, basically the concept of control is an illusion. And we create that illusion through the framing of our perceptions of what's occurring here in the distortions of sort of time and physical manifestation. So we have, really what we have is loving and unloving activity here, or thought, which would also, I call thought and activity. We have loving and unloving expression. And then those loving and unloving expressions manifest situations, right? So our unloving expressions are like when we turn away from our true nature, which is love, and we do stuff to like control people or try to whatever, manipulate people. But the part that's manipulated is not truly real. The part that's manipulated is a fragment that we've created for ourselves in our consciousness that we call the ego, or the false identity. And this false identity is used as a sort of costume for us. Eventually we learn that that's exactly sort of what's going on, that I'm not really any different than just an actor, and I can wear whatever costume I need to wear. And we start to realize we're not as limited as we thought. But in all of that, there's a lot of fear around, like, if that's true, then can't I just fly around? And then what's that going to be like? And like our minds start to go to these places too. Then we're also, we can be confronted as well with what will feel like our death. It'll feel like a death in some way. We can experience that as well in our consciousness. So it's not necessarily any physical thing happens, but we may have just a lot of opportunity to think about, well, what happens if I'm gone, and what's that about? And so I only invite people to check those really root energy frequencies in themselves when they feel really confident in their capacity to turn back to faith, because that's what triggers. It's sort of where we put our attention. That's where the light goes. You could think about it that way. And so if we're looking at these things about ourselves, these existential things, that's where we develop lots of fear, anxiety, and different things. and we can experience lots of physical symptoms. Some of you, Garganzul said that that the body was, the energies went wild listening to you. That's great. So, but that's the type of thing that starts to happen, is the soul stirs, the Kundalini shivers. We'll feel it in different ways. And that's one of the ways we can tell that we're really doing what we meant to do. I've had multiple shivers throughout this sort of stream. And a lot of what we're doing is pulling away from our compulsions for, you could call it recycled energy. We're used to trying, as humans, we're used to trying to get our energy from other people, and other people are used to giving it to us. We're used to that. Getting lots of, I want my parents, for example, let's say, to be proud of me and to tell me they love me, or to be happy about something I've done. So I do the thing and then I go to show it to them so that they can tell me it's good. And because the higher frequencies are a little harder to maintain, they not harder, that's not the right word, but they're a higher frequency, they're more energy. The recycled energy isn't going to do it anymore. So you're going to be invited to source from within your power, source from the divine directly, right? So you're not recycling power from these external sources. So you're going to be invited to do things like maybe give up coffee, which I've been invited to do and I'm resisting. But you're going to be invited to, so it could be very small, just coffee, right? Or it could be something much bigger, some other deeper codependence that we have. Wherever we're feeling that we're not whole without this thing, either a relationship or person telling us something or not, or, doing something that we find to be what is desired, or something that enlivens us through them. It doesn't mean we shouldn't experience like good things and joy with people. It's only when we're seeking it from a place of sort of struggle that we have to be worried about. So if we meet with someone and we're having a good time with them, that's not a problem. Like that's part of what's happening, is we're going to notice it feels kind of like blah, like this is blah. And usually that's part of it. Like it's like you could think of it a little bit like we're sort of we're doing energetic transfers with each other when we do this. We're transferring, and if it's not a harmonious frequency of transfer, if it's not a transfer in peace, it's gonna be like a little and we're not going to get sustained really from that frequency, because that frequency doesn't feel so great for us. So it's not going to feel very expansive. What we need to do then is look back on that interaction and try to learn, like what was my contribution to this? Like, what can I do about my way that I'm showing up that's bringing a frequency to me that doesn't feel very great, It doesn't feel like this is stuff I want to deal with, really. So what am I doing? What am I bringing to myself? And why? What's my lesson? What am I teaching myself about this? And we can look at our emotions about the incidents, about whatever it is, to guide us to how we feel scared, like what we're afraid of. Once we know what we're afraid of, then we can remember simply, oh yeah, fear isn't actually real. And we can hopefully eventually, we keep letting go of the fear. Eventually we believe. So when we first hear fear is not real, it's kind of like, okay, yeah, right. But then as we start to remember fear is not real, and we move with our inspiration instead of moving through compulsion, which is sort of like addiction, right? We're addicted to sort of external pleasures and material pleasures and relational pleasures, emotional pleasures. And so it doesn't mean that we won't experience emotion moving forward, but what we're being asked to do is notice our compulsions and our addictions to our states, and then surrender those. Basically, surrendering those states is actually sort of what makes it like, so you may have heard Sadhguru talking about how you feel buzzed all the time. That's a good way to describe. He's buzzed. He actually says like, I'm stoned. I'm stoned out of my tree right now and stuff. And he says things like that, and he's like, but I'm not inebriated. He's just in such a blissful state of peace when he's in those moments, and I'm sure he falls out of them sometimes. And maybe he doesn't. It's not important. But that's the state that like, that there's no fear. That's the state that sort of, I would say, most people are wanting to aspire to while still retaining some form of identity. Like that would be ideal, right? To just be in this state of presence and peace while still allowing the identity to express itself. That would be the state, I think, that we're genuinely most of us, or generally most of us, are trying to achieve. Some of us are trying to actually let go of the entirety of that experience, and those people are going to investigate that. So I'm one of those people that's looking in that to see sort of where are the limitations here. How much can I let go of Sean while still being able to function as Sean a bit, and that type of thing. And so everyone will have their perfect thing, and we don't have to let anything go. But stuff that's not really serving us, we're just gonna keep getting called to let it go. And it doesn't mean letting go of the thing. It means letting go of the attachment and the suffering around the thing. Around the thing. Be the way. Ah, yes. Yes. Yeah, we are here. Jesus said, I am the way. He also said, you may be as I am, but first you must die to yourself. And what my brother was saying was, what our brother was saying was that the self that I was talking about, that's afraid, it doesn't actually die so much, but it has to acquiesce eventually. And that's what it means. There's only one way. That is the way, and Christ is the way. There are many names for that, so it's not super important if we talk about religion or anything like that. It's all experienced, contextualized to make sense for the individual experiencing it. There aren't really frameworks here to actually truly describe what it is. Our language is a bit distorted. So yeah, exactly. It's man-made concepts. Just for example, something like "thou shalt not" is not. That's a distorted offering. The universe does not have. It has laws of how things are. It doesn't have laws of you don't do this or you're not allowed to whatever. There are just laws of how things are. The universe is. It's just true as it is. And so whenever you push against that truth or try to do something outside of those laws, you end up creating karma that pushes back on that. And it's the identity that does all of that for us, basically. The identity primarily is the generator of any karma for us, or unlearned lessons. And so the more we sort of let go of our identity, the more clear it becomes that there's not as many lessons for us as we had, because we've let go primarily of our identity. We'll experience things like walking past the mirror and going, oh, there's a person there. Oh, hello. Right? That sort of thing. And you might feel a little wacky. You might feel a little out of sorts, but try to just be patient with yourself and try to remain grounded. The I think it's beautiful that Rockefeller, that's a cool name as well, that had the Bible with the notes in it. The Bible is a really great book. It's I like to think of it almost like a magical manual for mystic tradition. There's lots of really veiled magical teachings that are in there, and that so like it's teaching on all these different levels, which makes it a really interesting volume to look at. And on one level, there's a control sort of paradigm happening. On another level, there's a very enlightened, loving, peaceful paradigm of unity. And then on another level, there's actually very mystical keys offered. And so if anyone's familiar with Christian mysticism, they might find some interesting things about how that all works. Paranormal magnet. Yeah, that's actually it's interesting you said that. So I call those paranormal, and those types of experiences, UFO sightings, close encounters type thing. I would call those all experiences that are designed as billboards to show us the infinite potential of the universe, and to eventually lead us to realize that we are that universe, doing that for us. That this paranormal, this ghosty, or this weird being that I'm seeing, or this entity seems to be holding me in my sleep. I'm having sleep paralysis. That's one I've had a lot. That these are us. These beings are us, and they are aspects of us that are essentially testing some of us as we open our eyes and start to see, because we open these eyes, but then this eye opens, right? This eye opens, and we start to see other stuff. We start to have some pretty funky experiences. And the important part is always that the fear that we feel, we're meant to let go of it. So we can think of these experiences, especially in the third eye, or sensory experiences that are they seem extrasensory in a way. There's claircognizance, clairvoyance, whatever. Those experiences we can think of as like generated for us by us. Not that they're not real like other things, but that it's through that we're learning to let go of some fears that are pretty freaky, right? Like one of the biggest ones that happened to me was I went to astral travel, and this was wacky, but I went to astral travel, and I usually float out of the body, and then I start to move. I felt something around like what seemed to be my ankle area in my energetic body. And then I started to fall. And I realized as I was falling, oh, I'm going into like the lower astral or something. And I felt I'm being pulled, like I had no will at all in the experience, which was odd. And so as I fell, I couldn't sense what was pulling me. I fell straight down into this dungeon sort of area, and there was all these sort of demonic beings around trying to threaten me in some way with weapons and like looking fierce and stuff. And I remember just being like, what is all this? Is this for me? And I remember laughing at the intensity of the fear, and just the momentary realization in the astral, oh, I'm being confronted, sort of. This is the demons that we've been hearing about in the astral now. So this was a new experience. It's not a dream. It's not a claircognizance. It's in the astral. So in the astral, I had primarily only had very, very positive, engaging experiences with other entities in various places. I primarily astral travel to have discussions with other entities. So, which is kind of weird now that I'm saying it out loud. But that's what I do. And when I went to do that time, and I don't usually control it that well. These are part of the cities for me, anyways, in my experience. They are spontaneously activated. I can try to intend to astral travel, and sometimes I get lucky, but you know, I've learned better to just feel when it's happening, and then I just let it happen. So I don't really seek it out. I don't really teach it because I don't really know how I do it, to be honest. I just get into a certain frequency or meditative state, I suppose, and then I just sort of pop out of the body. Not really sure how to describe it other than that. Anyway, so I got pulled down in, and then I realized it's all this is just like fear. I don't know if it's my subconscious mind or like actual entities or what's going on exactly, but I realized that it didn't matter at all. And it just felt like a roller coaster, sort of like, whoa, look at this, is crazy. And I was very excited, and the entities were very upset, seeming that I was not afraid. They seemed very unhappy. It was almost comical the way the entities that were around like just slouched, like almost like in defeat, in disappointment. And I didn't do anything at all. I just landed in this, it was sand or something, sort of. And then I just looked at them all, but I think I was just smiling at them or something. I don't really know what the body looks like in this state. It's hard, it gets a little fuzzy. But anyways, that happened. And so we end up having these experiences after we start to awaken and the third eye opens. And we can have them like that with astral travel. But it's all the same thing, or we can just have them in our relationships. It's all the same thing. It's all really the same thing. It's all the same programming of fear. Now, there are a lot of people who actually believe that Earth is a sort of psyop in many ways. And, you know, that's an interesting thought. It's an interesting thought. It's you know, it's hard to say. I would say that that there are certainly beings here that feed on fear, that are able to use frequency to influence the minds of individuals. That's the best way that and because they feed on fear, they essentially try to manipulate fear stuff so that people act out fear, and the fear energy gets all created, and then that can be harvested. And these entities essentially, they're not able to really connect into source for that themselves directly. They are a part of source. They've just they've sort of disabled that capacity within themselves. They can open up and learn it. They can, just like any third density being. So they framed a lot of the stuff that we experience here, and they through thought primarily. So most humans, you can look at most humans as kind of like the ones that are sort of really control oriented are probably sort of kind of like puppets in a way. They're still divine beings. They're still divine beings. There's nothing, you know, there's no aspect, depending on whether they're even if they're consciously participating in this type of thing, they're still divine. They're essentially probably operating on some kind of concept that whatever they're trying to do is for the best somehow. And it's important because what ends up happening is it's through this activity that of control and fear that people see the control and fear and then kind of awaken from it. So it's a service. Like, we can literally be grateful for being able to see this stuff, because we have to clear out this karma. We have to let go of the karma collectively and individually. And if we don't, then like we will eventually, we will. But the more we don't, the more challenging it becomes for us. And that's primarily, I think, the goal of kind of what we're doing. As if a wild animal entered. Yeah, you saw your years ago when I had a full height mirror and being in a liminal state, I once saw my reflection as if a wild animal had entered my home. Yes. Yeah. I've had that experience in my bathroom. I think I got out of the shower and I had that kind of, I was like, who's present? What are you? Yeah, I've had that kind of experience for sure. Did anybody have any other questions? I think it's about an hour and a half, and I think I went through kind of what's going on. The Queen of Impatience. Impatience is a big one. It's a big one. Impatience is one of the biggest things we learn here. Whenever we have a disappointing energy, there's always, we have to remember that energy is one energy. There's always an opportunity to look at the other side of things, the other polarity. So we can literally allow ourselves, it gets this simple, to just choose to be patient. Like, so when we're impatient, we can just choose, I don't have to be impatient. I control how I feel. Not control, but I choose to feel expanded, to feel I don't need whatever I'm impatient for. Like I can just let go of it. That's what impatience is sort of meant to help us do. And it gets frustrating for us because we have this feeling like I know what I want. I feel it coming, sort of, a lot of times. And it's not here now. And I want it now. Whatever it is. Or I want it to end now. And it hasn't ended and doesn't seem to be ending. Whatever it is. So we can get impatient about all those things. We have to be very, I think, try to be grounded, but also let our thoughts wander. And let ourselves, be free of what's going on. Gargan's Lul, expectations are closely related to manifestation. Yeah, I would actually say, in my experience, I'd say expectations are often quite problematic for us. Because it's our identity, this is my experience, our identity frames an expectation around a potential or a desire or a perception that the reality would be probably best to be that way. Like that's kind of what an expectation sort of is like, reasonably, I presume based on what I feel and know that way is probably the way. We expect it because intuitively it seems to make sense usually, but also logically or rationally we can frame it somehow. And we essentially get sort of stuck with this idea that once the expectation is not met, we suffer a lot of times because we wonder why. What did we have wrong about this? What was wrong? Where's the problem? And that causes us to then suffer, either very small or large. It depends on what the issue is and how emotionally charged it is. I think we can all probably relate to that. Like, we care more if something happens to one of our pets than we do if, like, somebody runs into our car. Usually, not everyone, but it depends, I guess, how charged you are with the material possession of your car. And we tend to think of pets and other humans sort of like our possessions a bit until we stop. We realize and we stop trying to like play with them that way. But yeah, I control versus I choose. Yeah, that's a really good way to frame it. The control paradigm is more of just us believing that we are controlling. It's not actually us controlling anything. It's just us thinking we are, which is us creating this. It's what causes us to create our hellish experience. In some, when people are talking about like the earth being hell, or that when they feel that depth of sorrow, it is usually due to that control oriented mindset in some way, which is very fear based. The more fear, the more control that one tries to have on their environment. Usually, the more they will avoid or try to manipulate, depending on how they feel. So, I choose, on the other hand, is like, oh no, I'm responsible for just what I choose to be. And we were talking earlier about I'm the way. So I'm not gonna, what is real in me is my divinity, and that can't be threatened. So I'm just gonna turn away from, someone who's attacking me, or I'm gonna try to offer them love in some way if I feel that I can do that. If I don't feel I can do that, then I'll just walk away quietly. We start to get called just not to engage or participate in some of these situations, or we get called to try to participate from the place where we're seeing them as they are, which is a divine, innocent being that's just learning of itself. And so we're choosing love over fear. And so when we choose love, we're not choosing control, we're choosing the opposite of control. If you think about what unconditional love is, unconditional love would be a love for another that just wants them to be at peace and happy. So if they don't want to be with you, for example, unconditionally you love them and want the best for them, so you would agree that they shouldn't be with you if that's what they feel. If they feel they shouldn't be with you, then you will end up agreeing. And that's how you can tell that your love for another is unconditional. And we're trying to establish that same level of unconditional love for ourselves. We're able to sometimes get there with others, and that's a signal that we're probably ready to do that to ourselves. That if we can let everything go of another, let them be as they are without our imposing of restrictions on them, then we can do that as well with ourselves. And we can trust that the part of us, the conscience, that part lets us know when we're kind of moving away from what we feel is aligned, right? That's the part that lets us know. We don't have to add on to it with guilt and shame and resentment after. We can just go, oh, that wasn't right. I need to correct. I'll correct that for later. It wasn't quite right. There was no mistake. It was just a opportunity to learn so that you can do sort of better and better and better, always expanding. It might not be necessary to fall short of expectations to get to examining assumptions. Exactly. We actually, I actually recommend, like, the more peaceful way, the most peaceful way, is to not have expectations at all. Basically, we have expectations, and it gives us a lot of catalyst, because we have desires and expectations and assumptions and lots of thought and stuff that went into things. So there's a whole really healthy buffet there of learning, right? But eventually we get, in my experience, we just get to a place of understanding that learning will kind of go on forever if we want it to. And we can choose, if we want to let go of trying to figure out the insane. the insanity of separation, trying to understand that it never ends. It never ends. And that's what all of our expectation and control and presumption and stuff is. In my experience, is that this idea that stuff is a little separate somehow, so we can choose something that's not, or we can know better somehow than the universe. You know, unless we have a kind of expectation and it's not met and we don't care at all, then that's fine, right? Of course, that's fine. If you're able to have an expectation, that's just a nothing more than a guess at what might be coming, you know? If you're not attached to it, then it doesn't disturb your peace. But if you're attached to it and it doesn't go the right way, then that's when we want to examine that. And I guess what I'm suggesting is we can also examine, if we want to, the need to examine. We can relinquish this state of questioning what is. That is how it is, and it doesn't matter what I thought of it. Whatever I thought of it is sort of eventually just mental noise. And the mind may cease, and stillness, it just is as it is. And so that may resonate, it may not. But I would just say I've spent many moons investigating these sort of like nuanced areas of presumption and assumption, and what's going on here, and who controls what, and what's the hierarchy of divinity look like, and where, and it basically, what I realized is that we're constantly evolving from varying degrees of separation, constantly, until eventually we know we are all that is. And this is like a long time, not in our human forms. Eventually we merge back with source. This is what I believe. And when we do that, we are no longer in any concept of any separation at all. We don't even have an identity at all. We are just source. So we start to go through stages and stages and stages and stages of that. And we just get invited to sort of move to the next, I would say, stage. Like, so at the human stage, I would say that the main mechanism of control is the individual and collective ego. So we have an opportunity to really look at all that and to try to understand it as much as we can. Eventually we get to a place, it's like, okay, I see. It wants to control, but it can't. What else do we do with that? So we move on to the next sort of shadow aspects of consciousness that we might want to learn about, if we're on a path of learning about the shadow aspects of consciousness, or the shadows that consciousness casts into the reality. So we're always raising that up and then looking at that at a more deeper perspective if we want to, or we're more concerned with our own peace and we're just letting go of things. And I think we'll just all know, we'll all feel and just feel called. We're going to start to feel like the body is a bit of a garment, where we wear the identity as a garment to be the way, to be the word, to be the path, to be peace. NDE, I don't have a memory of it, but during spine surgery, stopped breathing, had to be revived. Wow. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah, that's the type of thing that that's the type of thing where I was saying that, it may seem like someone dies, or it may seem like something wacky happened. None of that stuff in the world, in the physical world, matters that much as far as like what the specifics were. I don't mean your experience doesn't matter. Sorry. I should try to be specific. What I mean is, we facilitate our own awakening somehow. And basically we do anything that we can think of to make sure that it happens. at particular times or whatever it is. So we may manifest something in the body that needs surgery. We may do anything. We may get really dark thoughts. We may do anything. We may fall off of a mountain or something. So it could be really anything. And we'll do that to signal ourselves that it's time. And then from there, it then progresses at whatever rate. And I think that's basically everything that I wanted to say. I'm really grateful that you guys tagged along with me on this. I haven't done one of these streams in a while, especially by myself. I haven't done a stream by myself in a long time. But it was a lot of fun, and I liked all the interaction with chat. So I'm probably actually going to do more of this. Try to figure it out. I might do like Tuesdays and Thursdays or something. Maybe more than that. I guess it depends. We'll see. I feel like I'm going to keep getting these messages. And the source of the messages to me, like I said before, isn't super important. Because they just seem to make sense to me. They feel good. They make sense. They're about peace, you know? So who cares where it comes from? And then at the end of the day, I just try to remember that everything comes from the Creator. So Gloria in Excelsis Deo. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your faces. Sending lots of love, lots of light, and all the blessings. May you find peace. And be merry. Be merry. I hope you guys have a great day. Take care.